Before we begin, ask yourself this: what if the greatest villain in all of mythology was never truly a villain at all? What if behind the terror, behind the war, behind the burning cities and stolen queens, there stood a man of extraordinary brilliance, unshakable devotion, and a hunger for power so immense that even the gods themselves trembled? History remembers Ravana as the demon king who kidnapped Sita and brought about his own annihilation. But history rarely tells you how he got there. It rarely tells you what it cost him, what he sacrificed, what he endured, what he was given, and what he ultimately lost. Today, we peel back the centuries, we reach into the ancient fire of the Ramayana and the Puranas, and we ask the question that has haunted scholars and storytellers for millennia: why did Ravana have 10 heads? And what do those 10 heads truly mean? I am your host, Guru Acharya, and I welcome you all to this exciting new episode of the channel, The Eternal Odyssey, where we explore the stories of myths and fantasies. Chapter 1: The Birth of a Prodigy. The story of Ravana does not begin in darkness. It begins in grace. It begins in a lineage so powerful, so contradictory, and so dramatic that it could only belong to the world of the Puranas. Ravana was born to Vishrava, a great and learned Brahmin sage, and Kaksi, a woman of Rakshas descent, a demon princess who carried the ambitions of her kind in the blood of her veins. From the very moment of his birth, Ravana was a creature of contradiction. He was half divine, half demon. He was the grandson of the great Brahmin sage Pulastya, one of the Prajapatis, the mind-born sons of Brahma himself. And yet, through his mother's lineage, he carried the rage, the appetite, and the raw untamed power of the Rakshasas. He was not born to be ordinary. He was born to be extraordinary in every sense, for good or for catastrophe. As a child, Ravana displayed a mind that consumed knowledge the way fire consumes dry wood. He mastered the 4 Vedas, the Rig Veda, the Yajurveda, the Samaveda, and the Atharva Veda, before most children had finished learning to speak. He absorbed the 6 Shastras, the great bodies of ancient Indian knowledge, with an ease that left his teachers breathless. He learned the arts of war, the science of statecraft, the philosophy of the cosmos, and the subtle, powerful language of the sacred hymns. His father, Vishrava, looked upon his son and saw something rare, not merely intelligence, but an intelligence that burned. Ravana was not a student who memorized. He was a student who devoured. He was not content to know the world as it was, he wanted to command it. Chapter 2: A Devotion That Shook the Heavens. But knowledge was not enough for Ravana. Power was not enough. Ravana wanted something that no amount of study could give him, something that only the gods themselves possessed. He wanted immortality. He wanted supremacy. He wanted to stand above every creature in every world and know that nothing could touch him. And so he did what the greatest of ancient souls did when they desired the impossible. He sat down, closed his eyes, and began to meditate. Not for a day. Not for a year. For 10,000 years. Ravana's tapasya, his severe and relentless penance, was unlike anything the 3 worlds had ever witnessed. He sat in deep meditation on the banks of the sacred river, his body perfectly still, his mind locked in an iron focus that refused to break regardless of wind, rain, heat, or cold. He ate nothing. He drank nothing. He slept not a single moment. The forests around him fell silent. The birds ceased to sing. Even the rivers seemed to slow, as if the very earth recognized that something monumental was taking place. But Ravana's penance was not merely of the mind. It was of the body. It was of the soul. And what he chose to do to demonstrate that devotion was something so extreme, so shockingly violent in its sincerity, that it stands as one of the most dramatic acts of sacrifice ever recorded in any mythology across the world. With each 1,000 years that passed, Ravana took a blade and cut off one of his own heads. He offered it into the sacred fire as an oblation to Brahma, the creator, the grandfather of all existence. Each head burned. Each offering rose as sacred smoke into the heavens. 9 heads fell into the fire over 9,000 years of unbroken penance. 9 acts of absolute, irreversible self-sacrifice. When the 10th millennium arrived and Ravana reached for the blade one final time, ready to offer his last head, his final self, the very last of his existence to the divine, Brahma appeared. The Creator himself descended from his celestial realm, radiant with the light of the universe's first dawn, and placed his hand upon the blade. He stopped Ravana. He said, "Enough. What you have done cannot be ignored. What you have endured cannot be dismissed. Ask me what you desire, and it shall be yours." Chapter 3. What Ravana asked and what Brahma gave. This is the moment that changed the course of all 3 worlds. Ravana, kneeling before Brahma with 9 wounds where his heads had been, made his requests. And Brahma, moved by a devotion so extreme it had cracked the ceiling of the heavens, granted them. First, Ravana asked that all 9 heads be restored to him, and more than restored, that they be made indestructible, that no head once given back could be taken again by any force in creation. Brahma granted it. The heads returned, more powerful than they had been before, and with them came the understanding that what had been sacrificed and returned was no longer merely flesh, it was symbol. It was meaning. It was a map of everything Ravana was and everything he knew. Then Ravana asked for what every ambitious soul truly desires. He asked that he could not be killed by any god, any demon, any celestial being, any serpent of the underworld, any Gandharva of the heavens, or any great beast of the cosmos. He listed every powerful class of being in existence and demanded immunity from all of them. Brahma, bound by the sacred law of boons, granted this too. Ravana walked away from that meditation site with 10 heads restored, near invincibility in his grasp, and the absolute certainty that no force in any of the 3 worlds could bring him to his end. He had left as a devotee. He returned as a conqueror. He had come broken and bleeding. He left unbreakable. The man who walked away from that clearing was not the same Ravana who had sat down 10,000 years before. Something had shifted in him, not just power, but pride. Not just strength, but the dangerous, swelling certainty that he was beyond consequence. Chapter 4. What 10 heads really mean. Now we must pause the drama for a moment, because the ancient sages who recorded these stories were not simply telling fairy tales. They were encoding meaning. They were embedding philosophy inside narrative the way a craftsman hides treasure inside the walls of a temple. The 10 heads of Ravana are not simply the heads of a monster. They are a map. They are a portrait. They are a philosophical diagram of what it means to be the most comprehensively knowledgeable being in the world, and what it means when that knowledge exists without wisdom. The ancient commentaries tell us that the 10 heads of Ravana represent the 4 Vedas and the 6 Shastras, the complete body of sacred and intellectual knowledge that existed in the ancient world. The Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Samaveda, and the Atharva Veda represent 4 dimensions of divine knowledge: hymn, ritual, melody, and mysticism. The 6 Shastras, the great systems of philosophy, grammar, logic, music, medicine, and metaphysics, represent the full architecture of human understanding. Together, these 10 bodies of knowledge filled 10 skulls, and all 10 skulls sat on the shoulders of one man. Ravana was not 10 men. He was one man who contained 10 worlds of understanding simultaneously. He could debate with any philosopher. He could compose music that made the heavens weep. He could read the sky like a physician reads a pulse. He played the veena with fingers so skilled that Shiva himself is said to have paused in his cosmic dance to listen. There is a reason the sages chose this particular imagery. A man with one head sees the world from one direction. A man with 10 heads sees it from 10 directions at once. Ravana could hold 10 contradictions in his mind simultaneously, explore 10 philosophical positions at once, feel 10 emotions at the same moment. He was not merely intelligent. He was vast. And yet, here is the tragedy the sages were pointing to. Having 10 heads did not mean having 10 hearts. Having 10 minds did not mean having one soul that knew when to stop. Ravana possessed the width of all knowledge but lacked the depth of wisdom. He knew everything about the world and nothing about his own limits. Chapter 5: How his greatest gift became his greatest curse. And so we arrive at the inevitable end of every story about a man who reaches too high and forgets to look down. Ravana, the scholar, the devotee, the musician, the ruler of the magnificent golden city of Lanka, became a tyrant. The same intelligence that had made him remarkable made him arrogant. The same devotion that had earned him Brahma's boons became the engine of his hubris. He began to see himself not as a servant of the divine but as its equal. He conquered the 3 worlds. He humiliated the gods. He once famously attempted to lift Mount Kailash itself, the sacred abode of Shiva, with his bare hands, and the great god crushed him beneath it with a simple press of his toe, trapping Ravana for 1,000 years until the demon king, weeping in agony, composed the Shiva Tandav Stotram, one of the most beautiful hymns ever written in praise of the destroyer. Even in his worst moments, Ravana's genius leaked out of him like light from a cracked lantern. But it was desire that finally cracked him beyond repair. When he saw Sita, the daughter of the earth, the wife of Rama, the embodiment of virtue and grace, something in Ravana's 10 heads chose the wrong answer. Every one of those 10 skulls, filled with the wisdom of the Vedas, knew it was wrong. His own brother Vibhishan told him it was wrong. His ministers told him. The omens of the heavens told him. And yet he did it anyway. He kidnapped Sita. He brought her to Lanka. And in doing so, he sealed the fate that Brahma's boons had protected him from, because when Ravana had listed every being in creation from whom he wanted immunity, he had laughed at the idea of being killed by a man. He had not thought to include humans in his list. He had been too proud to imagine that an ordinary man could threaten him. And that single crack in his armor, born of ego, born of that same insufferable certainty that power had planted in him, was the crack through which the arrow of Rama would ultimately pass. The war of Lanka was not simply a war between a prince and a demon king. It was the universe correcting its own imbalance. It was the ancient law of dharma reasserting itself against a man who had accumulated every form of knowledge except the knowledge of restraint. Ravana died on the battlefield of Lanka, 10 heads falling one by one beneath Rama's divine arrows, and as his last breath left him, even Rama, his destroyer, wept. Because everyone who truly understood Ravana knew that what died that day was not a monster. What died was a miracle that had gone wrong. What fell was a mountain that had forgotten it was also made of clay. Chapter 6: The Legacy of Ravana. Ravana is worshipped in parts of India, Sri Lanka, and Southeast Asia even today. He is not worshipped despite his darkness. He is revered because of his complexity. Because his story teaches us something that simple heroes never can. It teaches us that knowledge without humility is a weapon without a sheath. It teaches us that devotion without surrender can become its own form of pride. It teaches us that the very gifts that make us extraordinary can become the walls of the prison we build around ourselves. Ravana had 10 heads but could not hear the one voice of wisdom that might have saved him, the quiet, humble voice that says, "You are not above consequence." No one is. The 10 heads of Ravana are not a grotesque image from a children's story. They are a mirror. They are a warning. They are a portrait of what the human mind can become when it fills itself with everything except the one thing that truly matters, the wisdom to know what not to do with everything you know. And if this story stirred something in you, if these ancient fires still burn bright enough to illuminate your present, then do not let this end here. Share this with someone who loves mythology, who hungers for the stories beneath the stories, who knows that the oldest tales carry the newest truths. Like this video so more people can find it. Subscribe to this channel because we are just getting started, and the mythological world we are about to explore together is vast, ancient, and impossibly alive. The gods are still speaking. Are you still listening? See you until next time. Thank you.